Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're not storming castles, discovering new lands, or sailing into battle on a dragon-backed warship. No, tonight you are just a scribe in Goryeo, Korea. And yes, you are. Be so tired already. You're lying on a straw mat under a drafty roof in a tiny honok. The air still wet with the chill of pre-dawn mist. A thin blanket covers you, but you've spent most of the night rolling over creaky joints and silently dreading the sound of the morning gong. Outside, roosters are already practicing their early set. You've got at least 200 tax receipts to copy before sundown, and your inkstone is chipped. Also, your back hates you. Honestly, you probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while we're setting the mood, drop your location and local time by in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little community stretches. Stop now. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch your arms above your head and wince. Your elbows sound like tree branches. You're 28, which in this era is roughly equivalent to a modern-day office worker in their 50s. The wooden floor is cold. You squint at the outline of the ceiling beams in the gloom, already cataloging the tasks ahead. Boil water, grind ink, rebind a scroll whose strings snapped, and maybe, just maybe, figure out how to fix that one line. Pew smudged yesterday, the one listing the governor's rice contributions. That smudge haunts you. Your honok isn't much wooden panels, a paper door, and a fireplace that only heats one room at a time. It was built for someone half your height and a quarter your ambition. You share it with two other scribes, one of whom snores like a bear with sinus problems. The other mumbles Confucian quotes in his sleep, which is more disturbing than you'd think. They're still curled up in their corner mats, but you're up now. Time waits for no bureaucrat. The first job, boil the water. You shuffle outside, sandals slapping against packed dirt. A low fog hangs over the village, softening the edges of everything. You know that behind the haze, the bamboo grove is still. They're just past the narrow footpath that leads to the main records hall. Your breath fogs the air as you kneel beside the hearth, coaxing reluctant coals into action. You could swear they were more cooperative yesterday. Eventually, the water boils, and you pour it carefully into the inkstone, slowly grinding your ink stick in slow, steady circles. The scent rises sharp, bitter, almost comforting now. There's something hypnotic about it, like the smell of dusty libraries or old book sect. This one stains your hands permanently. You're not just making ink. You're making a contract with fate. Every drop must be earned. Your palms are already blackened. Your fingernails hopeless. Scribes, like you are, considered low on the bureaucratic ladder, somewhere between person polishes the magistrate's boots and person who feeds the horses who carry the boots. And yet your work is critical. You copy land records, harvest reports, tax notices, royal decrees, and the occasional criminal confession. which you always skim, because, let's be honest, they're juicy. Historians still argue whether Goryeo scribes were overworked civil servants or respected craftsmen of the state. You'd argue neither. You'd argue that you just want a nap. Breakfast. Oh, right. You forgot. You grab a cold rice bowl from a covered pot in the corner of the room. It's hard enough to be used as a weapon. You chew thoughtfully, staring at the stack of scrolls by your mat. One of them is fraying at the edges. You'll need to resew the ends before you can even begin copying. But first, the ink. Always the ink. You carry your grinding stone back inside with all the reverence of a monk holding a sacred relic. One misstep, one clumsy elbow, and you're starting from scratch. You settle onto your mat, adjusting your paper and brush with slow, practiced care. The scroll lies before you, yellowed, faded, a whisper of its former dignity. You dip your brush, exhale, and begin. The first stroke is always a risk it. Might be too thick, too shaky, too tired looking. But it lands cleanly, a good omen. You press on dot outside. A dog barks. Somewhere, someone is chopping wood. But your world shrinks to paper and ink and the scratchy whisper of your brush. Your shoulders already ache. Calluses throb gently on your fingers, reminders of a dozen scrolls gone before. Your handwriting is neat, almost beautiful, but always the same neutral, official, unremarkable. There's no room for flair here. One extra stroke, one misplaced dot, and the tax collector down in Genju will misread a number and jail someone over half a bushel of rice. Today's scroll is a census report from a mountain village you've never seen. 50 households, 39 men, 12 oxen, one suspiciously long list of fermented fish debts. You raise an eyebrow. The village scribe there either really loves fish or someone's laundering soybeans. By midday, your back is on fire. You shift your legs, stretch them forward, and immediately regret it as a muscle in your calf seizes up in protest. You push on. There's a strange comfort in the rhythm of it. Dip, stroke, lift, dip, stroke, lift. You could almost fall asleep doing this, and sometimes you nearly do. A quirk of Goryeo bureaucracy. Sometimes scribes include tiny poems or proverbs in the margins, coded expressions of fatigue or passive resistance. Nothing that would earn punishment, but just enough to make the next scribe laugh quietly. You consider adding one. Maybe something about how even a butterfly would collapse under this paper. But you think better of it. The inspection official is due any day. You finish another scroll. You roll it tightly and set it in the woven basket by your side. Only 11 more today. You allow yourself a half smile. The day has just begun. You're not exactly thrilled about breakfast. It's the same thing you had yesterday, and the day before that, and the week before that. A bowl of barely warm Ducris porridge that tastes like regret. It's thin, barely salted, and has the texture of a tired sigh. On the side, you get a couple of slices of fermented radish kimchi, aged just enough to slap your sinuses awake. You chew slowly, trying to convince yourself it's comfort food and not emergency fuel for surviving another day of ink-stained misery. You eat cross-legged on the floor while watching your breath fog the morning air. Your fingers still ache from the brushwork earlier, and one is starting to blister in that familiar spot where the wood of your stylus rubs against your skin. You wrap it in a scrap of old linen. Congratulations, you're now officially injured at work, and the workers' compensation program consists of walk it off. As you finish breakfast, you glance toward the scroll pile. It's not just tall, it's leaning, like a bored monument to paperwork. You can already feel the bureaucracy breathing down your neck. Somewhere in the distance, the bell from the local Confucian Academy tolls twice. You were supposed to have started transcribing the land tax register by now. Oops. You lick the last trace of porridge from your bowl and set it down gently. There's a faint crust of dried ink on the inside. Bive your sleeve where your brush hand rests. You rub at it uselessly. These stains are like regrets. They don't come out, no matter how hard you scrub. Today's first task is transcribing a village land registry that came in from a provincial magistrate who has remarkably bad penmanship. And no, he didn't hire a scribe. He believes real men write their own records. You believe real men don't subject others to this unholy chicken scratch. You unroll the scroll and stare at it with dread. It's like deciphering the thoughts of a tipsy goose. You hold the brush with the poise of a reluctant artist, breathing deeply as you try to copy the shapes into something both accurate and legible. This isn't creative writing, you're glorified photocopier with a bad knee. But there's an odd satisfaction in the symmetry of Hangul and Hanja characters, like drawing boxes that mean something. You don't always know what they mean, but they look very serious. As the day warms, the ink dries faster. That should be a blessing, but it just means you're constantly grinding more. Your hands smell like soot and fermented glue, an oddly grounding combination, like dirt and dreams. The fire in the hearth has died down to embers. You ignore it. Your focus is absolute, even if your posture is laughably bad. You shift forward, ignoring the way your spine protests. A scribe's breakfast isn't meant to fill you, it's meant to keep you vertical. But by mid-morning, your stomach is growling again, distracted by the sound of a nearby farmer yelling at his ox. You imagine the ox has it better than you. At least it gets to stand up and move around. You, meanwhile, are slowly fusing with your floor mat. At some point, one of your fellow scribes wakes. It's Deoksu, the younger one who's convinced he'll pass the civil service exam next year. He looks smugly rested. You hate that about him. He yawns obnoxiously and offers you a half smile, asking if you've seen his inkstand. You nod toward the corner right next to his shoes, which, by the way, haven't moved in 3 days. You have no idea what time it is anymore. The sun has moved, and the shadow of the doorframe stretches differently now. You take a moment to crack your knuckles each, one snapping like an old floorboard. Just one break, just one moment to realign your spine and remember what it's like to not be bent over a scroll. But no, the stack hasn't shrunk. The paper keeps coming, like a bureaucratic hydra. Every scroll you complete seems to beget to more. You wonder if the court is intentionally drowning you in paperwork to see who snaps first. Historians still argue whether scribes in the Goryeo era had a fixed daily quota or were simply expected to keep copying until their souls quietly slipped away between characters. Outside, someone's child is crying. A chicken runs past the window. You dip your brush again and keep working. Then disaster. The worst thing that can happen in your morning. You sneeze mid-stroke. There it is. One line ruined. A whole column by of neat characters smeared into a sad ink puddle that looks like a squid fainted. Pew freeze. Brush still hovering. Heart sinking. You know what this means. You can't just blot it and move on. You have to redo the entire sheet. This is rice paper. It doesn't forgive. You groan softly, because showing emotion is for nobles and people with free time. You carefully lay the ruined scroll aside and reach for a fresh one. It's thinner, probably the last of this batch. You make a mental note. If no new shipment arrives this week, you'll have to reuse the scrolls with only light damage. Again, your career is hanging by a thread, literally and figuratively. At least there's one comfort. You know how to make scrolls last longer. A trick you learned from an old monk who used to mix pine resin into his glue. It smells awful but strengthens the fibers. You might try it tonight, after copying 3 more registers to family charts and some court ruling that no one will ever read. You sigh and return to work. A breeze floats in through the open window, lifting the corner of your paper and threatening to ruin your alignment. You weigh it down with your inkstone, grumbling. You're starting to suspect nature itself is conspiring against scribes. But here's the secret. Something no one tells you about this job. There's a rhythm to it. A quiet, steady music in the scratch of the brush, the breathing between strokes, the soft rustle of scrolls unfurling. You're not just copying, you're preserving, translating the lives of ordinary people into permanence. You may not get credit, but somewhere down the line, a monk, a scholar, or maybe even a confused student, centuries from now will thank you for your neat handwriting and grim determination. You won't be famous, you won't be rich, but your brushstrokes might outlive everyone in this village. Another scroll finished. You set it aside and allow yourself a moment to stretch again. Your breakfast is a distant memory. So is your youth, probably. But there's something to be said for showing up, day after day, scroll after scroll, while the world outside forgets you exist. You're not heroic, you're not glamorous, you're just essential, like socks or roof tiles or slightly bitter porridge. The sun now angles through the lattice of the window, casting pale grids on your workmat. It's almost midday, though you've stopped checking the time, because what's the point? Lunch will come when someone remembers, or when your stomach starts audibly begging. For now, you trudge forward, scroll by scroll, letter by letter, wearing the weary face of a man who's not entirely sure if this is work or punishment. Probably both. You're halfway through copying a timber requisition from a mountainside village, something about how the local carpenters insists that the trees on the northern slope are spiritually resistant to rotting. You resist the urge to add a sarcastic comment in the margins. Again, but it's tempting. It's always tempting. Especially when you're working on a document that uses 15 different honorifics to describe wood. Your wrist is starting to twitch from overuse. You pause to flex your fingers, rotating your hand in slow circles, watching the way your joints crackle like kindling. You rub your shoulder against the grain of a wooden pillar behind you, grinding into a tight knot that has lived there since spring. You briefly consider becoming a hermit, a mountain life. No ink, no brushes, just moss, soup, and silence. But then you remember hermits still write scrolls, cursed poetic scrolls. Just as you settle back in, a knock rattles the paper door. You freeze mid-brush stroke. Visitors are never good. Visitors bring scrolls. Sure enough, the door creaks open, and a boy from the magistrate's office pokes his head in. He's got a scroll pouch slung across his chest, like he's delivering precious relics. His nose is red from the cold, and his sandals are far too big clearly. A hand-me-down from an older brother or a recently deceased uncle. New orders. He mumbles, setting the pouch down with exaggerated care like it might explode. You manage a dry thank you, already reaching for the pouch with the resigned air of a man picking up a shovel in the middle of a snowstorm. You open it and peer inside. Yep, 3 new directives, 1 disciplinary notice, and oh joy, a property dispute that's already been rewritten 6 times. You roll your eyes so hard you nearly sprain them. Historians still argue whether these constant resubmissions were a sign of meticulous record-keeping, or just the result of extremely petty officials who couldn't agree on whose turn it was to fix a spelling error. You know the truth. Both you offer the boy a rice cracker from your stash. He takes it like it's gold, bows clumsily, and scurries off. You close the door behind him with a sigh, dropping the new scrolls beside your ever-growing mountain of today problems. Lunch arrives a short while later, not delivered with fanfare or ceremony, just shoved into the room by an assistant cook who smells like boiled cabbage and disdain. You get another bowl of rice, some pickled turnip, and a lump of cold tofu that still has yesterday's flavor clinging to it like a bad decision. You eat quietly, dipping the tofu in a bit of soy paste, chewing slowly while staring at the corner of your ink tray like it owes you money. Your housemates are back now. Deoksu, the civil exam optimist, is humming softly while copying lineage, records, and Mingyu, the older one with a permanent scowl, is cursing under his breath about a merchant whose property line was apparently drawn with a drunk goat. You all work in the same silence you've shared for years, comfortable, irritated silence, where every cough means hurry up, and every sigh means this isn't getting any easier. You decide to tackle the property dispute first. It's between 2 brothers in a southern coastal village who can't agree on who owns a crab-filled flat. The document is filled with flowery insults, wrapped in formal prose. You can practically feel the salt in their handwriting. One of them uses the phrase deceitful as a lotus worm. That's either a brilliant insult or a weird poetic compliment as you copy it. You find yourself chuckling under your breath, prompting Deoksu to glance over suspiciously. You wave him off and keep working. Honestly, if you had a silver coin for every passive-aggressive scroll that landed on your mat, you'd be able to retire by now. Buy a goose, live by a river, dream big. Mid-copy, you notice something odd. The scroll smells faintly of citrus, not the usual ink and paper musk. You lift it to your nose and sniff again. Orange peel. That's unusual. You flip to the back and find a scribble in the edge, likely from another scribe. Do not trust the crab, brother. No signature, just a warning. You smile. Someone out there gets you. You finish transcribing the complaint, then carefully rewrap the original and place it back in the storage basket, labeling it with the standard red thread to indicate ongoing nightmare. Your copy goes into the second basket. Clean, cursed, complete. You've developed your own filing system over the years. No one else understands it. That's exactly how you like it. You're deep into copying a grain requisition Nausum. Coastal official requesting barley to be shipped before the spring floods, when a fly buzzes into the room. One single fly. It lands on your scroll, then your hand, then the inkstone. You shoo it, swat at it, curse it under your breath. It doesn't leave. It seems particularly attracted to official seals. You are about 5 seconds away from declaring war. You finally squash it with the back of your hand, then carefully wipe the ink off your palm using the hem of your robe. You glance at Mingyu, who hasn't looked up once. His brush keeps moving, oblivious to the battle you just fought and won. Eventually, the sun begins to shift again, shadows moving along the wall like sleepy dancers. You finish another set of scrolls and stack them in quiet triumph. Your neck cracks when you straighten. You stare out the window at the courtyard beyond, watching a pair of sparrows fight over a grain husk. You wonder if the sparrows know how. Lucky they are no scrolls, no directives, no land disputes about crab-infested tidal flats. Just feathers, flight, and the occasional stolen crumb. You have 1 hour left before the overseer does his rounds. Just enough time to start the disciplinary notice. You unroll it slowly. It's about a local official who was caught drinking rice wine on duty and fell into a ceremonial pond. Twice, you pause, blink, then check the date. Yes, twice. Same week, you debate adding a marginal note that says, maybe give this man a holiday. But instead, you sigh and begin the careful work of rewriting the notice in sober, dignified prose. You make sure to include the phrase, grave breach of decorum. That always does the trick. Your ink is low again. You grind another stick, your wrists now wooden with fatigue. But the smell rises, comforting and bitter, just like always. Another scroll, another day. You keep going, Your brush trembles slightly as you set it to a new sheet, but you press on. The ink glides unevenly. At first, your wrist is starting to fight you, like a tired horse that's gone one rice field too far. You adjust your grip, pause to breathe, and force your body to comply. Again, as always, because if you don't copy, this land tax deferment petition by sundown, you'll be explaining yourself to someone who uses tardiness and insubordination in the same sentence. This petition comes from a farming village, apparently been struck by locusts. Again, you're not surprised. The Goryeo countryside has more locusts than it has priests. You glance through the request. The farmers claim their fields are hollowed by the gnawing mouth of heavens. Fury, very poetic. You almost feel guilty for needing to summarize it in exactly 42 strokes and 2 seals. As you dip your brush again, the ink doesn't take properly. The paper has absorbed some moisture. It must have been sitting too close to the kettle. You grimace and swap it for another sheet, gently tapping the edges against the table like it owes you rent. You mumble to yourself, half a chant, half a threat. Your fellow scribes don't even look up. Everyone's too far gone into their own silent wars with their respective documents. Sometimes, when the ink won't flow and the brush splits mid-stroke, you wonder, who exactly are you writing for? Not the farmers. They'll never see this. Copy. Not the officials. They'll skim it for keywords like deferment, grain, or exemption before filing it into oblivion. No, you're writing for the systems. The churning, yawning beast of bureaucracy that hungers for legibility, uniformity, and exact margins. Historians still argue whether the Goryeo bureaucracy was brilliantly efficient or soul-crushingly excessive, based on the number of times you've copied the phrase by the will of the palace and the customs of heaven. You lean toward the latter. You pause long enough to stretch your back, arching just enough to crack 3 vertebrae. It's not pleasant, but it's progress. Your room smells faintly of ash, old parchment, and unspoken resentment. The fire in the brazier has died to little more than a red sigh. You tug your outer robe closer, trying to trap what little warmth you've got left. As you reach for your inkstone again, you hear a distant voice shouting in the courtyard. Something urgent, but not your problem. Probably a rice shipment gone missing, or a horse eating someone's laundry. You let the noise drift past like a cloud and return to your scroll. You've developed a gift for tuning out everything except ink, paper, and the quiet despair of repetition. The scroll now finished, you move to the next. A family genealogy. These always make you squint, not because they're hard, but because the margin spacing is so tight it feels like stuffing your entire life into a sock drawer. 5 generations in a single roll of paper. Half of the names are repeated. Yongsu, Ginho, Yongsu, Agan. The rest are just vaguely threatening titles like Third Uncle of the Winter Flood. Please copy each line with robotic precision, all while resisting the urge to doodle tiny swords next to the names of the men who started. Land disputes. Lunch feels like a memory from someone else's life. Your stomach is a sullen echo chamber. But you keep working. That's the rhythm. That's the trick. Feed the page, and maybe the page will feed you. Do. Kesu breaks the silence suddenly by dropping his brush. It rolls off his desk with a clatter that startles everyone. He scrambles after it, muttering apologies. Mingu groans without looking up. You're going to fail the civil exam if you can't even hold a brush. Deoksu glares, but says nothing, clutching the brush like it betrayed him. You're secretly rooting for Deoksu. He's annoying, yes, but you remember what it was like to believe you were destined for more than copying the failures of other people before the ink stains became part of your fingerprints, before you stopped dreaming of promotions and started budgeting for shoulder bomb. Another scroll. Done. You place it in the growing stack. You sip the dregs of lukewarm barley tea from a cracked ceramic cup, more grit than liquid at this point. You try not to think about the last time it was properly cleaned. Suddenly, a tiny thrill. A royal decree scroll arrives, carried in by one of the temple messengers. He's breathless, wind-chapped, and clearly unimpressed by the lowly scribes before him. But the scroll he hands over is wrapped in red silk and sealed with gold thread. That means it's important and fragile, and probably cursed. You unroll it slowly, fingers trembling slightly, either from cold or anticipation. It's a military logistics order. Movement of supply carts from a northern garrison. You blinked. The phrasing is ... odd. The seal is real, but the wording sounds like someone edited it in a hurry. You glance at the margins, tiny corrections, scrawled in different hands. Oh dear. You'll need to copy it exactly as is, even if it makes no grammatical sense. Welcome to royal orders. You obey them, and you do not fix them, even when they read, like someone chugged rice wine and rolled their forehead across the scroll. You carefully transcribe every word, including the weird repetition of the phrase with deliberate haste. That's not even a thing. But fine, you're not in charge. As you work, your mind wanders back to that little fly from earlier. It was annoying, but at least it was alive. You've begun to wonder whether you're slowly turning into paper. If someone tapped you on the shoulder too hard, would you crumple? The sunlight is dimming now. Shadows stretch longer across your mat. You realize you haven't spoken in hours. There's something deeply monastic about it if monks wore ink-splotched robes and suffered frequent paper cuts. You decide to take a brief walk before the next round of copying, just a few steps to the well, to splash your face and remind your joints that movement is still a possibility. Outside, the world smells like dust and pine. You watch a couple of local boys sword fighting with sticks. One of them is dressed in what looks like a rice sack. He's winning. You root for him. You dip your hands in the freezing well water. It stings, but it's real. The kind of sting that keeps you awake, if not alive. You shake your hands dry and head back inside. The scrolls are waiting. They always are. By the time you return to your mat, the room feels heavier. Not colder, just heavier, as if the scrolls themselves have begun to develop a gravitational pull, dragging your arms down with each passing word. The fire in the brazier is sputtering out again, and no one bothers to stoke it. Everyone's too focused, port to resigned. You light the lantern above your head with a bamboo taper, carefully shielding the flame with your sleeve. The soft glow dances across the ink tray, illuminating your latest assignment, a marriage registration between two noble families from the eastern province. You sigh as you unroll it. These are always deceptively complex, not because of the actual marriage, those are usually simple affairs, but because of the titles. You can't just write, Lady Min got married. Oh no, she's second daughter of Magistrate Min, bearer of Spring Plum honors, keeper of the Jade Inked Pan, the groom, eldest son of Elder Kim, heir of the thrice purified clan, graduate of the Autumn Scroll Trials. And these are the short titles. You dip your brush, straighten your back, regret it instantly, and begin the formal script. Your strokes slow, your breath deepens. This kind of writing demands beauty curves, breathy spaces, weight in the downstrokes. You have to make it look like this union was preordained by the stars, not negotiated over 6 bottles of fermented bean liquor by 2 scheming uncles. Halfway through, you sneeze. Just once, but hard enough to dot the corner of the scroll with a speck of ink. You freeze. Time stops. Deoksu looks over. Mingu flinches. You both stare at the dot like it's a criminal confession. You have 2 choices. Try to scrape the ink off and risk tearing the paper, or start over. You mutter something that earns you a side-eye from the ancestors, then carefully fold the scroll away. Time for take 2 again. Historians still argue whether these over-formalized marriage records were about social order or just an elaborate excuse for the upper class to feel important. From your corner of the scriptorium, the answer is obvious. Both, always, both dot. Your second copy goes smoother, though your handwriting carries the weary drag of someone who just watched half an hour of their life disappear into a blot. You finally finish, adding the double seal at the bottom with the family emblems. There, done. It's not poetry, but it'll hold. You let the brush drop into the water bowl with a small plop that feels weirdly satisfying. You rub your eyes. Your vision is doing that thing where the characters start floating slightly off the page, like they've grown tired of being legible. You blink them back into place. No such luck. You'll need a break soon, or you'll start adding verbs where nouns should be. Again, Mingu rises to stretch, groaning like an old tree. I think I've lost the feeling in my toes, he says. You look down at your own feet. When was the last time you moved them? Could they still be feet? They might just be regrets now, wrapped in cloth. A small bell rings from the outer hall. That means it's review time. Once a week, your overseer selects a handful of scrolls at random and checks them for errors. If he finds one, a mark on your record. 3 marks. You're transferred. Transferred means worse ink, less food, and a scroll room with no fire. So, you live in terror of that bell. You gather your scrolls carefully, aligning the edges like they're made of glass. You pass them to the assistant with big pow, the wide eyes and ink-smudged nose. Then return to your mat and pray. Not to the Buddha, not to the ancestors, but to the overseer's failing eyesight. You distract yourself with a report from a shrine in the mountains. Something about pilgrims bringing too many shoes and disturbing the local fox spirits. It's put a weird one. The shrine keeper claims that leaving sandals near the altar causes birds to scream at night. Is it true? Who knows? You just write it down. Quirky or not, it's a welcome change from tax ledgers. You get to draw the little mountain symbol, and that makes you feel like an artist again. Briefly, you even smile. Then the assistant returns. He bows, says nothing, just nods your scrolls past review. You allow yourself a moment of triumph, very internal, very dignified. You do not scream with joy or leap over the fire pit. You simply nod back and return to work. You are now 2% less doomed. The sky outside is dark now. Lanterns glow in the hallways beyond. Occasionally, a monk's slippered foot taps by, or someone coughs down the corridor in a way that makes you wonder if they'll still be coughing by next week. Cold season takes the weak and the slow, and the ones who forget to soak their socks overnight. A soft knock, another delivery. This one from a palace runner, wearing the stiff uniform and the expression of someone who knows he outranks you. He holds out a scroll with 2 fingers, like it's beneath him. You take it with both hands and a slight bow, because protocol, plea, even if he's clearly 10 years younger and doesn't know how to pronounce proclamation. You open the scroll, and oh, no dot. It's a circular proclamation about regional dialects. Apparently, certain provinces are pronouncing royal names incorrectly during rituals, and the court is gravely concerned about linguistic uniformity. You rub your temples. You'll have to copy this one in 3 regional scripts so local clerks can understand it. You look at the scroll pile, then at your ink tray, then back at the door the runner left open. For a brief moment, you consider fleeing, vanishing into the hills, taking up basket weaving, living under a pseudonym. You could be you, the quiet, but instead you sit back down because you're a Goryeo or a scribe. And this is what you do. You copy, you survive, one brushstroke at a time. You wake to the sound of a bamboo clack against your forehead. Not the most graceful way to start the morning, but you nodded off mid-scroll, face nearly pressed into the wet ink. Deoksu, gleeful in that annoying younger brother sort of way, had snapped a reed to rouse you. You swat lazily at him, smear a half-written sentence, and immediately regret both actions. Another scroll ruined. Another reminder that sleep and bureaucracy don't mix. You wipe the ink from your cheek, half expecting to see characters permanently imprinted into your skin. Honestly, that wouldn't be the worst tattoo idea you've ever had. A basin of cold water waits in the corner. You splash it onto your face, bracing for the shock. The sensation jolts your senses just enough to function, but not enough to feel. Pay live. You tie your hair back with the same cloth ribbon you've used for 3 years, frayed, ink-dotted, loyal. Then you take your seat, shoulders already slouching. Today's task, Temple inventory records. These are some of the most tedious documents you encounter, not because they're long, but because they contain the slow death of imagination. 2 bronze bells, slightly cracked. 3 statues of Avalokiteshvara, missing fingers. 9 prayer mats, 4 of them with mildew. And yet someone needs to write them. Because someone, somewhere, wants to make sure the shrine of Radiant Lotus isn't claiming 12 bells when it only owns 10 dots. As your brush glides through the list, you spot something odd. 1 jade turtle, possibly haunted. You raise your eyebrows. There's no explanations, just that. No follow-up, no footnote. Just a haunted turtle wedged between incense sticks and sacrificial bowls. You stifle a laugh. There's your fringe tidbit for the day. You briefly imagine the turtle crawling across the temple floor, whispering secrets to monks, maybe rearranging prayer stones when no one's looking. You'd write a whole poem about it if you had the time. You don't. Historians still argue whether the Goryeo temples exaggerated their relic lists to maintain imperial funding, or simply had very creative scribes. You're leaning toward both. Again, always both. You take a moment to adjust your posture. Your knees have gone suspiciously silent, which usually means pain is building like water behind a dam. You reach for a jar of ointment, minty, bitter, blessed by a monk who claimed he once rubbed it on a tiger bite. You're skeptical, but it works well enough for scroll-induced agony. The room is quieter today. Mingu is out, summoned to the provincial office for some higher-level task. It's strange, without his occasional grunts and sarcastic mutterings. Even Deoxys seems more focused, diligently copying imperial land use codes with an earnestness that's almost cute. You let him be. For now, midday arrives with a soft chime from the courtyard bell, signaling the meal hour. You set down your brush carefully. Don't want to leave another ghost stroke on the parchment hand. Rise on legs that feel both ancient and hollow. Outside, steam wafts from the cookhouse, promising barley gruel with the faintest hint of pickled radish. A feast, in scribe terms. You grab your bowl and ladle your portion. It's hot, thankfully, and doesn't smell like last week's accident. You sit on a low step and let the warmth seep through your hands. Around you, other clerks and scribes murmur in tired voices. No one has the energy for real conversation, so most of the sound is just chewing and sighing. One of the older scribes, Jahi, with a beard that deserves its own postal district, leans over and asks, still dreaming of the civil exams. You shake your head before you even finish swallowing dot once. Maybe. Not anymore. He nods like he expected that. That's good. You're better off staying in the shadows. You don't know if it's meant as comfort or warning, so you let it drift past like steam from your bowl. Meal done. You rinse the bowl, wipe your hands, and shuffle back inside. The scrolls await. They always do. Like waves in an unending sea of rice paper. They return no matter how many you complete. This afternoon's assignment is a personal letter dictated by a noble widow. These are more interesting, if only because they show actual human emotion. Her writing is poetic, stilted, but heartfelt. She speaks of her late husband, her sons' lack of ambition, and her sister's obsession with falconry. You try not to judge. Halfway through, she dictates, "Though my garden is overrun with weeds, I cannot bring myself to pull them, for they bloom where he once stood." You pause, brush in mid-air. It's ... beautiful. Actually, you copy it slowly, respectfully, and then she adds, "Also, tell my cousin to stop stealing the family soap." You stifle a grin. People, no matter the century, are gloriously petty. As you finish the letter, you take a breath and look around the room. It's quieter now, the scratch of brushes like the patter of soft rain. You feel a strange calm, even as your wrist throbs and your back complains. Maybe it's the poetry. Maybe it's just delirium. Hard to say. The final task of the day is another tax audit report. You try not to scream. You'd hoped the haunted turtle would have protected you. But alas, you dip your brush, sigh dramatically, and begin. By order of the land steward, overseen by the Office of Grain Compliance. You're 2 paragraphs in when you notice something strange. The grain tallies don't add up. The harvest declared by the village is almost double what they claimed last year, despite a recorded drought. You squint at the numbers. This could be fraud, or a clerical error, or both. You write a small note in the margin, just a polite inquiry to flag the discrepancy. You won't accuse anyone. That's not your job. You just nudge the wheel and hope someone smarter or at least more political pushes it the rest of the way. Historians still debate whether village scribes were silent watchdogs of corruption or merely passive observers. You suspect most were too tired to be either. As evening drips in through the shutters, you finish your last scroll and stretch. You'll feel like a bookshelf someone's overfilled bowing, creaking, but still upright. You light the small candle at your corner for one last look at the day's work. It flickers gently over your scrolls, your tools, and your stained fingertips. A whisper of ink, a whole life measured in lines and seals. You bow slightly to the stack, out of habit or reverence. Then you blow out the flame. Sleep is still hours away, but at least the turtle hasn't moved. You wake up in the middle of the night to an itch in your shoulder blade that no human arm is designed to reach. You contort like a stunned octopus, achieve partial relief, and then promptly knock over your ink tray. You hear it before you see it, the delicate thip of porcelain meeting wood, then the soft glorp of ink pooling into your scroll rack. You bolt upright. Disaster. You scramble to soak it up with a rag, blotting like your life depends on it because, in a way, it does. The scrolls you just finished copying were meant for early morning delivery. If they're ruined, it means an all-nighter. You press down, hoping to draw the ink up, but the parchment is already bruising black. You look at the stain, deep, irregular. One of the characters is now entirely obscured, which was probably something harmless, like approval or grain. Now it looks like eel. You wonder if anyone will notice. You sigh. Of course they will, so you do the only thing you can do. Start again. You gather your materials, light a taper, and resign yourself to the quiet company of insomnia. Outside, the temple bell tolls, once marking the third watch of the night. It's the hour when ghosts are said to roam, but honestly, you're more worried about ghosts made of bureaucracy. Your brush moves more slowly now, but also more steadily. It's strange. In the middle of the night, the palace feels like a different world. The air is cooler. The noise has drained away. All that's left is the rustle of parchment, the flicker of light, and the occasional snore from a fellow scribe, who either finished early or simply gave up. You lean into the rhythm, dip, stroke, lift, repeat. Again, it's almost meditative, except your wrist is vibrating like it's been cursed. You rotate it a few times, wince, and keep going. As the scroll takes shape, you find a strange peace in the monotony. The phrases are familiar, now measured, official, deliberately ambiguous, by authority of the tax steward, in accordance with regional statute, with deference to seasonal variability. You wonder how many of these phrases you've written in your life. Hundreds, thousands. There's a quiet power in it, you realize. Not glamorous, but undeniable. These words, your words, decide whether a village gets taxed double or pardoned entirely, whether a merchant loses his stall or keeps his roof, whether a widow's claim is processed or ignored. You're just a scribe, but your brush is sharper than any soldier's blade, and far more permanent. Historians still argue whether Goryeo scribes were aware of their own influence or simply tools of the state. You think about that as you ink the official seal. You are tired, yes, but not blind. A breeze flutters through the open lattice, carrying the scent of pine. You glance out and see the courtyard bathed in moonlight. The ginkgo tree in the center stands still, its golden leaves unmoved. You close your eyes for a second longer than you mean to. When you open them, your candle has burned lower, wax spilling, like a frozen waterfall, onto the stand. You blow it out. Time to deliver the scroll. The night courier is waiting in the hallway, peas wrapped in layers, his hat low, face impassive. You hand him the scroll with both hands and a stiff bow. He nods once, tucks it into his pouch, and vanishes into the mist like a ghost with an itinerary. You return to your corner. The ink, blot from earlier, still glares up at you. You cover it with a scrap of cloth, like that'll make it go away. You stretch out on your mat. No time for a proper rest now, just a napper horizontal negotiation with reality. You wake again at dawn. Your back cracks like a rice cracker. Your mouth tastes like dry ink and regret. You shuffle to the wash basin, splash your face, and stare at your reflection. The ink stain is still on your cheek. It's been there so long, it's starting to feel like a birthmark. Breakfast is rice, porridge with something that might have once been a scallion. Mute in silence, eyes half closed, while the world gradually warms with light and chores. You return to the hall. The scrolls keep arriving. Today's featured document is a request from a provincial inspector for more ink. Not metaphorical ink. He's requesting 8 blocks of pine ash ink and 4 lacquered trays to go with them. There's a whole paragraph on how the current ink smells suspiciously of fish, and that it disturbs the flow of governance. You don't laugh, but your brush does wobble. You copy the request in triplicate. The last copy must be done in seal script, the ancient blocky style that no one actually enjoys. You hunch over it, recreating square after square, like a child, carving characters into wet clay. It's slow, meditative, and deeply annoying. Dio Kesu glances over and whispers, seal script again. What did you do wrong? You don't answer. You just grunt and keep scratching at the parchment like a disgruntled squirrel. Historians still argue whether the persistence of seal script in the Goryeo bureaucracy was due to reverence for tradition. Poor sheer institutional stubbornness. You lean toward the latter. You suspect the only reason you're still using it is because someone in a palace tower likes how it looks on a wall. By midday, your wrist is officially mutinying. You wrap it with a strip of cloth soaked in mint and vinegar. The smell clears. Your sinuses, at least. Your final scroll of the day is a minor edict about river dredging in the northern provinces. It's boring, deeply boring. So boring, in fact, that halfway through you begin to wonder if you've already written it once before. You probably have. These things come in cycles. Dredge, flood, complain, dredge again, as the sun sets. You add the last signature, blow gently on the ink to dry it, and set it on the stack. You don't feel accomplished, just done, and that's something. The morning arrives like a sigh you forgot you were holding in your sleep. You rub the crust from your eyes, sit upright, and wonder very seriously if you're actually awake or still trapped in a very long, very beige dream about ink and paper. A quick glance at the half-finished scrolls says you're awake, and behind schedule, you shuffle toward the corner where your brush kit waits. Loyal and miserable, refuel the inkstone. Grind slowly, letting the friction lull your mind into something resembling focus. The scent of pine, soot, and glue fills the air, a reminder that everything in your world smells slightly burnt, slightly bitter. Today begins with personnel records, specifically promotions. These are a bit more exciting than usual, less grain and punishment, more petty drama and favoritism. You scan the list of names, recognizing a few. That clerk who's always suspiciously cheerful, getting a bump to regional administrator. That other one who never blinks, demoted. No reason given. You sigh. No scroll ever tells the full story. As your brush glides over by order of the Ministry of Personnel, you catch a note in the margins. It reads, "See attached grievance from lower-ranked official." Curious, you rifle through the documents and find it a 2-page rant penned in impeccable calligraphy. The complaint details unfair favoritism, mysterious disappearances of merit certificates, and somehow missing carp. You pause. A missing cup. You flip back. Yes, the loss of my ornamental fish during inspection week was surely no accident. Till you blink, reread, and decide this might be your new favorite document ever. Historians still argue whether such grievances were taken seriously or quietly filed under too bizarre to pursue. Judging by the tone of this one excessively polite yet deeply bitter-hued wager, it's not his first complaint, nor his last. You copy the grievance, resisting the urge to add your own commentary. You do, however, allow yourself one indulgent flourish on the tail of the character for calm. A small rebellion. Lunch arrives with a clatter of bowls and the unmistakable scent of kimchi, too enthusiastic for its own good. You and Deoksu sit outside, legs crossed, steam rising from your rice. He asks if you've ever thought of writing a novel. You nearly choke on a radish. A novel. You echo. He shrugs. You're good with words, and you make up half of what's in those. Purports, anyway. You give him a look. That's called creative paraphrasing. He grins. Exactly. You contemplate it. Not seriously, of course. You'd never get permission. But still, the thought of writing something not tied to tax records or grain disputes. Tempting. Dangerous, slightly thrilling. As you finish your meal, a messenger approaches D, winded and carrying a scroll bound in red ribbon. That means urgency. You rise and take it with both hands. Inside, a royal dispatch, marked with the seal. Bove the Crown Prince's office. Your pulse stutters. It's not every day the palace directly contacts a low-level scribe. You break the seal carefully, unravel the scroll, and read. It's a request note, a command, but close for a summary of agricultural output across 5 northern provinces, cross-referenced with rainfall records and oddly lunar phases. You stare at the scroll. Lunar phases. It's an old beliefs, till held by some that the moon affects crop yields. You've heard of it. You've also heard it debunked by several very grumpy astronomers. Still, if the Crown Prince wants it, you'll provide it. Moon logic and all. You gather old scrolls, scribbled ledgers, even a dusty almanac you didn't know you still had. You spread them out across your mat, forming a patchwork of rice paper and string. Deoksu wanders by, takes one look, and immediately retreats without a word. Wise. The data is spotty. Some records are immaculate, with charts and marginalia. Others are vague at best. Crops poor, blame sky. Thanks, Jinju District. Very helpful. You cobble together a rough timeline, comparing full moons with reported harvest yields. Do note that during months with blood moons, several regions claimed bumper crops. Coincidence? Probably. But the scroll doesn't ask for your opinion, it asks for patterns. And you can give patterns. You begin to write. Report on agricultural output in relation to lunar observations, as requested by the office of His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. The calligraphy is your best today, measured, elegant, every character carefully balanced. You include disclaimers, of course phrases like may correlate, subject to interpretation, and the ever-useful pending further verification. Historians still debate whether these moon reports influenced any real policy or were merely an exercise in celestial curiosity. You like to imagine a court astrologer poring over your report by candlelight, nodding solemnly, then declaring, "Yes, more. Rice on crescent moons. As the sun sinks lower, you seal the scroll and hand it off to a royal courier who bows deeper than you're used to. You feel a strange pride. You've written dozens of reports this month, but this one might possibly be read by someone, or actually matters. You watch the courier disappear through the outer gate. Then you return to your corner, your bones already creaking in protest. Before you sit, you roll your shoulders and mutter, "One day, I'll write about something that isn't rice." You sit anyway. There are still 37 more scrolls to process, and one mystery carp to ponder. The next morning greets you with the smell of damp parchment, faint mildew and disappointment. Rain came in the night, soft, insistent, and entirely uninterested in your drying scrolls. You shuffle to the storage shelves and find the lower stacks gently curled from moisture. Like forgotten noodles, you exhale through your nose, quietly. If you start shouting this early, you'll rupture something. Salvage begins. You unroll the damage with the delicate panic of someone peeling a sticker they can't replace. Some scrolls are salvageable, just a little warped. Others have birthed entire ecosystems of smudge. One of them now reads, "All grains to be blessed instead of assessed." That's either divine intervention or a clerical disaster. You sort them into piles, rewrite, pray it dries, and lost causes. There are too many in that third pile. Dotio Kesu arrives late, takes one look, and mutters, "Rain demons." You nod gravely. There's no need to elaborate. You both set to work. It's a quiet partnership, the kind formed by proximity and shared suffering. He handles the more formulaic rewrites. You take the politically sensitive ones, like the trade agreement between two provinces that refuse to agree on anything, including the name of their shared bridge. You have to phrase it carefully, not too flattering, not too critical. One word out of place, and you'll have both provincial governors breathing down your neck, or worse, sending you fish. The bridge is the issue. Each province claims they built more of it, so the wording must be exquisite. You try. The bridge, jointly constructed, no, too generous. The crossing established through mutual tolerance. No, you can't say tolerance. You settle on the bridge, whose foundations draw strength from shared purpose and effort. You pause. It's vague. It's poetic. It doesn't say who built what. Perfect historians still argue whether scribes acted as neutral recorders or subtle political players. With sentences like these, you know where you stand. Carefully in-betweened. Later, you get called to the overseer's alcove. He's an older man, wrapped in layers that rustle like dry leaves, and he gestures you forward without looking up from his scroll. He's holding your lunar crop report. Did you compare these patterns with the astrologer's almanac? He asks. You blink. I used the provincial archives, sir, and the seasonal moon calendars. He grunts. Well, the prince was pleased. Do you freeze? He glances at you. He sent word. Said the report was adequately mystical, yet numerically sober. You have no idea what that means, but you nod like it's the highest compliment of your life. And the overseer he's requested. You continue compiling these lunar reports for the next 3 seasons. Your soul briefly exits your body. 3 seasons of cross-referencing crops and moon charts. You smile politely. You bow deeply. And as you walk away, you whisper under your breath, adequately mystical. You return to your desk to find teas, a new pile of petitions waiting. Deoksu has left you a dried plum and a note that just says, "Fight on." The next scroll is a bizarre one. A local lord has filed a complaint about noise, specifically from singing monks. He writes that their midnight chants disrupt the rest of noblemen and frighten dogs. You chuckle. He also requests that the monks be relocated to a less vocal monastery, preferably one in another province. You sigh, crack your knuckles, and begin writing the official response. The office recognizes the sacred nature of all religious rites and advises. Mutual consideration among communities sharing space, blah blah blah. But halfway through, you pause. There's a phrase the Lord used, the droning night caters of the hills. You reread it, and for a moment, you're not even mature impressed. The man has a flair for poetry and pettiness. Historians still debate whether these colorful, noble complaints were taken at face value or simply mocked in private. You, at least, always save the juiciest lines for your mental scrapbook. That night, as the rain taps again on the tiled roof, you lie awake wondering what it's like to be a monk in the hills, chanting under moonlight, unaware or perhaps completely aware that a nobleman somewhere is covering his ears with silk pillows and muttering curses. Your life is so different from theirs, and yet connected. One scroll brings 2 distant worlds into brief collision. It's strange and humbling and kind of funny. You dream of bridges, but they're made of parchment and stretch across ink-dark waters. Somewhere in the distance, monks sing, and a nobleman yells, "Keep it down." The next morning, you find a new memo from the Ministry of Rites. They want an inventory of ceremonial candles length, wax type, burn duration, for all upcoming rituals across the southern provinces. You stare at the scroll, then at your inkstone. Candle reports. You begin copying, and as you do, you think, this is your life now. Carp complaints, moon crops, monastic decibel disputes, candle logistics. It's ridiculous, and somehow you wouldn't trade it by now. Your hand moves across paper like it has a will of its own, brush to ink to parchment, thought to word. You no longer think about the shapes, you just conjure them. Muscle memory, like a song hummed in your sleep. This morning's assignment arrives with a ceremonial clatter, a wrapped bundle from the Royal Bureau of Music. You blink. Music. That's not your usual beat. You untie the cords and unroll the scrolls, immediately greeted by rows of tiny notation, more dots and ticks than words. You recognize the format, Gonch notation. It's how melodies are encoded, though it always looks a bit like someone spilled ink while sneezing. Inside, the bundle is a royal request to document revisions made to the upcoming festival's orchestral arrangements. New instruments, added tempo changes, updated lyrics for the sacred spring procession song. Apparently, some court composer decided the original lacked emotional gravity. You sigh. Musicians dot still. The job's clear. Document the changes. Copy the new version in legible calligraphy, and prepare an official scroll to be archived in the palace library. Easy enough. Or so you think until you see the marginalia. A tiny, aggressive note beside one measure reads, "Tempo increased due to royal foot tapping." You read it twice. Apparently, the Crown Prince has a strong opinion about drum rhythms. You try not to imagine him seated stiffly on a golden-laid chair, toes wiggling like a percussion metronome, but you do. And now you can't stop. You copy the changes, carefully, with reverence, but not without amusement. A single offhand scribble beside the flute section reads, "More melancholy, less goose." You don't know what that means. You don't want to. Historians still debate how much royal influence shaped court music beyond what was officially recorded. You, at least, know one section exists because of toe-tapping and a dislike for goose-sounding flutes. Later that day, you're summoned unexpectedly to the outer audience hall. It's not a punishment, at least, not immediately. You're told to bring the scroll you just finished. Your heartbeat politely panics. When you arrive, you see an older scribe already seated, dressed in formal robes. Beside him, a court musician in brighter silks, holding a zither and looking vaguely annoyed. They're arguing quietly, but with the pointed hisses of practiced rivals. You're ushered forward. The older scribe gestures at your scroll. Read it aloud. You clear your throat and begin. Your voice trembles at first, but steadies. As you speak, the musician interjects, "No, that's not the final arrangement." The scribe counters, "This is what was submitted." You stand in the middle, scroll outstretched, trapped between quill and cord. Eventually, a compromise is reached. You are to create two versions, one with the revised tempo and percussion for the spring ceremony, and one preserving the composer's original artistic integrity. Whatever that means, you walk away with a headache, two identical-looking scrolls, and the sudden realization that bureaucracy in the arts is somehow worse than in agriculture. .doc-su finds you that evening, staring at a bamboo slip that just says mournful cadence required. He doesn't ask. He just hands you a sweet rice cake and says, "Eat. It'll help you do." It doesn't. But it was nice of him. Back at your desk, another scroll waits, this one from the Ministry of Rights. Again, they've sent you the final seating arrangement for the upcoming spring festival. A giant grid of names and titles. It's your job to confirm the honorifics, seating precedence, and make sure no to rival officials are placed within earshot. Pit of each other, you groan. This is the worst kind of puzzle, equal parts etiquette and explosive politics. Two scribes misseated an official last year and ended up transcribing sutras by candlelight for a month. You remember, one of them developed a twitch dot. You spread out the grid. It's massive. 2 full scrolls long. You start matching titles that rank: Grand Administrator, Assistant Envoy to the Southern Ports, Deputy Steward of Ritual Kitchens. So many titles, so many fragile egos. You find one conflict immediately. The Governor of Huangju and the Chief Inspector of Markets are seated, backed. You remember reading a report where one accused the other of funneling bribes through melon shipments. You gently move the Chief Inspector for seats left. Crisis averted. You make it through half the scroll before spotting another nightmare. The head of the Scholars' Council is seated beside the Royal Falconer. Innocent enough unless you know the backstory. Apparently, during a hunt 3 years ago, a royal falcon stole the scholar's rare manuscript right out of his lap and shredded it mid-flight. There were tears. There was yelling. The falcon was not punished. You shift the falconer to the opposite end of the hall. Historians still argue whether these seating decisions were strategic, political statements, or just random acts of survival. You now believe it's both. As you brush the final character of your revised plan, you feel a strange satisfaction. You may not have built any bridges, but you've prevented a few from collapsing. Outside. Rain again. Gentle, relentless, a fitting soundtrack to your world of paper, people, and unpredictable percussion preferences. You extinguish your lamp, curl into your blanket, and whisper, less goose, more melancholy. It makes sense now, almost. The festival looms closer now, like a wave you've seen from far off and can no longer outrun. You wake up and already know. Today will be about panic, polishing, and probably a few fires, metaphorical. You hope you arrive early, yet still late. The courtyard swirls with runners. Pages dash past carrying last-minute proclamations, silk banners, and entirely the wrong color candles. You are immediately stopped by a clerk with wild eyes and a very serious question. Do we capitalize heavenly radiance in the procession, him or not? You blink, always. He vanishes before you can explain why. You're not even sure yourself. Back, in the scribe chamber, your desk is barely visible beneath scrolls, final reviews. Duplicate copies, approval seals to apply. You roll up your sleeves and plunge in. First task, the royal welcome. The script must be flawless. You've copied it twice already, but the minister's aide sent back edits, one of which just reads, add more warmth, but not joy. You stare, bet that note for a long time. More warmth, not joy. What are you? A fire with an attitude. You adjust accordingly. The court extends its solemn yet gracious welcome to all dignitaries present, whose presence brightens the rites with appropriate serenity. It's nonsense. It's perfect. You seal it with the red dragon stamp and move on. Historians still argue whether scribes had any true creative control. You suspect it was less control and more quiet rebellion via punctuation. By midday, the chamber stinks of ink and dried plum paste. Everyone's hunched, silent, and slightly vibrating. Even DXU mutters, "If I copy the word auspicious one more time, I'll scream." You believe him. Suddenly, a page bursts in with a scroll from the royal stables. You think, horses? No. But no, it's worse. It's about manure, specifically. The procession path runs past the stables, and someone has lodged an official complaint about the smell. There's even a sketch attached, showing predicted scent radius like a weather chart. You have to write a formal directive, politely, requesting the stable hands increase straw layering for olfactory reasons. You manage to ensure the fragrant harmony of the upcoming rites. Please employ enhanced ground covering along the western route. A masterpiece of diplomacy. Next comes the backup copy of the ritual litany. It must be written on hanji paper, made from mulberry bark and treated with sacred resin. The texture is weirdly smooth and resists your brush like a grumpy cat. Every stroke needs twice the pressure, and if you make a single blotch, it's ruined. The resin makes corrections impossible. No pressure. You hold your breath, write slowly, and about halfway through, the chamber door creaks open. You glance up just enough to miss your brush tip snagging. A blot. It's small, but it's there. You don't cry, you just breathe. Then you pick up a fresh sheet and start over. DEOK-Sue sees it. He doesn't say anything, just places a sweet bean cake beside you, like a sympathy flower. You eat it with the blank stare of a man betrayed by a tree's inner bark by late afternoon. You're copying the seating plan again, yes. Again because someone finally noticed that two rival poets have been seated too close. You remember one of them once wrote a passive-aggressive poem accusing the other of stealing metaphors. It ended with the line, "Your moon is borrowed." You move him to Matt's to the right. Poetry is war, and you are the peace treaty. Outside, drums begin their slow boom festival rehearsals. The rhythm pulses through the stone walls. You can't help but tap your fingers. It's oddly comforting, like a heartbeat louder than yours. Then a final scroll arrives. This one's gilded, Royal Commission. You hold it with reverence. It's the king's personal blessing, to be read aloud before the spring rites. Only the most senior scribe usually transcribes this, but that scribe injured his hand last night trying to lift a lacquered gong. Being chosen as the replacement, you exhale deeply. The air feels heavier. This scroll will live in the archives for generations. Students will study your brushwork. Your mistakes, if any, will be immortal. No pressure. You mix your ink slowly, deep black. You test your brush. You center yourself. Then you begin. The royal words are ornate, heavy with metaphor. Let the streams of spring thaw ignorance. Let harmony blossom in the soil tilled by virtue. You fall into rhythm, your strokes steady. You don't blink, you don't move, just flow. One character, then the next. Every loop and hook an act of reverence. You don't even notice the time passing. just the brush, the ink, the paper, the beat of your breath, and the distant drums outside. You finish just as the sun dips low, brushing gold across the wooden floor. The chamber is quiet. You place the scroll on the drying rack, hands trembling slightly, and bow toward it without even thinking. You did it. Historians still debate which Goryeo royal blessing scrolls were written by named scribes. You hope quietly, secretly, that one day a sleepy scholar somewhere will trace these characters and say, "This one had a steady hand." You pack up for the night, fingers ink-stained and numb. Deoksu claps you on the shoulder, and you both shuffle out beneath the glow of festival lanterns being hoisted one by one. Be soft golden eyes blinking awake in the twilight. The streets are humming now, but your mind drifts somewhere quiet. To the brush, the paper, the beat, you did your part. You built the invisible frame holding the day together. Tomorrow, the world celebrates. Tonight, you rest, morning of the festival. You wake not to the usual creak of shutters or the sound of Deoksu boiling barley porridge, but to drums, low, slow, and thundering through the floorboards like someone knocking on the bones of the city. You dress with care. Today's robes are formal, heavy, and embroidered with the seal of the Bureau of Documentation, to stylized cranes in flight over scrolls. You'd laugh at how pompous it is if it weren't already making you sweat. You step outside, and the city has transformed. Stalls that normally sell cabbage or ink blocks now display garlands of cherry blossoms, miniature paper cranes, and red silk fans. Children are running in tight, excited circles, already smeared with powdered dyes. There's a cart, vendor selling sweet chestnuts, next to an old man muttering predictions about the success of this year's harvest based on cloud density. Everyone has a role today. Yours begins the moment you pass the outer wall of the palace compound. The scribe pavilion is in chaos, but festive chaos. Pages are racing about with scrolls tucked under each arm, red cords dangling behind like kite tails. You make your way to the central chamber, where the master scribe waits. He eyes you with the heavy look of someone who hasn't slept. You've been assigned the king's procession scroll. You'll walk with it in the third line behind the Minister of Rites. His voice is dry as unbuttered rice. You try to nod solemnly, but your heart somersaults. The procession scroll is a big D-lit. Every detail must match the visual order of the royal entourage. If a name is out of place or an honorific miswritten, there'll be consequences. Not death, probably, but possibly exile to a bureaucratic post involving irrigation. Data. You've seen it happen. You clutch the scroll like it's warm bread and follow the other scribes to the southern gate, where the procession is forming. And there they are, the court musicians in gleaming robes, the royal guards with crimson sashes, the ceremonial oxen whose horns are painted gold and who look frankly very confused about the entire situation. You line up in your designated row, scroll held at chest height, and wait. A boy sneezes behind you. No one laughs. It's too serious for that. when the gates open. The crowd roars and you begin to move. The procession is slow, deliberate, each step a count of 3. The king's palanquin gleams in the middle distance, carried by 12 servants who never flinch. You feel the heat rising off the road, the pulse of the drums, and the gaze of hundreds lining the path. You glance to your right. Deoksu is a few rows over, holding a banner. He catches your eye and gives you a micronod. Solidarity, you pass under paper lanterns strung from the gates like floating jellyfish. The smell of incense thickens. At one point, you realize a woman in the crowd is sobbing not with grief, but with awe. She clutches a paper talisman and mouths silent prayers as the king passes. You don't blame her. The moment does feel bigger than life. Historians still argue how much of the Spring Festival was political theater versus sincere spiritual renewal. Walking in it now, you're certain it's both. Eventually, the procession reaches the grand pavilion. This is where it gets delicate. You're ushered to a side platform, along with the other scribes, just out of direct sight but within earshot of the main stage. Your role isn't over. You have to hand off the procession scroll to the court announcer at exactly the right moment. You crouch on your knees, scroll cradled in your lap. Sweat collects in the small of your back. The royal orchestra strikes up a slow melody, and the court announcer, robe stiff with embroiderous, steps forward. He extends his hand. You place the scroll into it without a word, without shaking. It's the smoothest part of your whole day. The announcer unrolls it, clears his throat, begins. He reads from your work, and as he does, you feel yourself detach from the heat, the aches, the politics. The words are clean, the titles correct, the order precise. It's not just ink anymore. It's real. You did this. The rites proceed, choreographed bowing, offerings of rice and silk, chants rising and falling like breath. From your spot near the scrolled dais, you see the king only briefly, his face unreadable, his gaze fixed ahead, wearing the crown of ballot, which looks very heavy and absurdly impractical. Later, when the drumming fades and the officials bow one last time, everyone moves as one toward the post-ceremony feasting area. You and the scribes are released to the side garden, where low tables wait under flowering trees. You slump beside Deoksu, who has already undone the top button of his robe. He raises a teacup in your direction. To not screwing up, you clink it. The food is cold but plentiful. Sweet rice cakes shaped like fish, dumplings stuffed with ginger and greens, a sticky walnut treat that gets lodged behind your molars. You eat like someone who didn't expect to still have all their fingers by day's end. As the sky darkens and lanterns flicker to life, you and Deoksu lie flat beneath a pine tree, full and half-dozing. He murmurs, "Think they noticed the smudge on the announcer's robe." You say, "I hope so." And you laugh, just a little. The kind of laugh that says, "Today, just today, you won't worry about ink or honorifics, or flutes that sound like waterfowl. Today, you did your job. You walked the line. You passed the scroll. and somehow nothing caught fire. The day after the festival feels like the morning after a storm. You expect silence, but everything is still shifting. The air smells faintly of burnt incense and spilled rice wine. Somewhere in the city, drums still echo, like a party that didn't get the memo. You wake up late. No pre-dawn scribe rush. No shouting outside your window. Even Deoksu, usually up humming and heating bean paste, is snoring softly. You lie there a while, staring at the ceiling beam, trying to remember what life feels like without scrolls balanced on your knees. Eventually, the day starts. Slowly, you don't rush into your robes. You don't even brush your hair with much urgency. The bureau is open, but today the stakes are lower. No proclamations, no royal addresses, just aftermath. When you arrive, the chamber is quieter than usual. Everyone moves like their joints are on loan. Someone is sleeping at their desk, cheek pressed into a scroll. No one scolds him, not even the supervisor, who's off in a corner, massaging his temples and muttering. The oxen were 2 paces off tempo. Do you understand what that means? You don't. No one does. It doesn't matter. Your first task, festival report, SCRIBING. It sounds simple, but it's really in passive aggression. The officials dictate it, and your job is to make everyone look good even when they absolutely weren't. You write sentences like, "The musicians performed with almost unbroken rhythm, and the crowd's enthusiasm occasionally challenged ceremonial boundaries." Historians still argue whether festival reports were actual records or just creative fiction in calligraphic form. Today, you're leaning toward fiction. Deoksu appears mid-morning, clutching a jar of fermented pear juice. He hands it to you without speaking. You sip it. Tastes like relief. Then comes the real task. Archival prep. Every scroll, directive, PIM, and seating chart from the past week must be organized, sealed, and submitted to the Royal Library. And who does that job? The scribes. Of course, you carry bundles tied in red silk, each heavier than your regret over joining the bureau in the first place. The library archivista woman named Wajeng, who speaks in whispers and glares like a hawk, meets you at the gates. She inspects the first scroll. She murmurs, frowning at a perfectly written character. What's wrong? You ask this loop. She points to a flourish in the king's benediction, a little expressive. It's meant to symbolize radiant unity, you explain. She pauses, then nods once. Fine, but if I find a doodle in the margins again, I'll send it back with a rat. You smile politely, but in your mind, you draw a tiny rat doodle right on her shoe. The rest of the day is scroll stacking, classification, and the kind of precise knotting that turns your fingers into claws. You can't believe you once worried about creative control. Now, you'd give anything to never see another red seal again. Still, there's something soothing in the repetition. Label, roll, tie, shelve. You fall into rhythm. Deoksu hums a tune that's suspiciously off-key, but oddly comforting. Occasionally, someone throws a scrap of failed parchment into a basket, and you all cheer like it's a sporting event. At one point, you discover an extra copy of the final litany that no one remembers producing. It's written in the exact style. Be senior scribe young, but he was busy that day. Is it ghost work? Someone whispers. You all stare at the scroll. No one wants to touch it. Finally, Deoxu shrugs, picks it up, and adds it to the archive. If it is haunted, maybe it'll bile itself. Lunch is dried fish and leftover dumplings eaten in the courtyard while sitting on scroll crates. Someone passes around a jar of sesame snacks. You lean against a pillar, belly full, and wonder what normal people do with their afternoons. Do they nap, write poetry, watch ants? You try watching ants. It's deeply boring, but in a good way. By late afternoon, the scroll room is nearly empty. The big tasks are done. You sit at your desk, brush in hand, but with nothing urgent to copy. You decide on a whim too. Write a poem. It's terrible. Something about moonlight on spilled ink and the sorrow of misaligned seals. But it's yours. Historians still debate whether Goryeo scribes saw themselves as artists or just bureaucratic tools. Sitting there writing a poem no one will read. You think maybe both. Just as you're finishing your last line, a page appears. At your elbow, there's a message for you, he says, holding out a folded scrap of paper. Pew, take it, expecting a request or correction. But it's a thank you note from the Minister of Rights. It's short. Your work during the festival was noted. Your hand is steady. Your honor remains intact. That's it. No signature, just those words. But still, you read it twice. Then tuck it into your sleeve pocket like a lucky charm. Dot. As the sun lowers behind the tiled roofs and shadows stretch long across the floor, you sit quietly. No rush, no brush, no deadlines. Just a quiet room and the faint smell of ink and roasted barley. The storm has passed. The scrolls are shelved. Your hand, though tired, did not falter. And for today, that's enough. Some mornings return like muscle memory. The skies are pale again, like brushed rice paper. The sounds of the city return to their usual rhythm, hammering, chickens, footsteps, the off-key hawking of dried fish. You wake up before the sun, because your body's been trained to dread lateness more than sleep deprivation. You stretch your palms, and they crack in 3 places. A fine way to begin another day in the scriptorium. There's a new assignment waiting when you arrive. Transcription of border reports from the northern provinces. A stack of thin bamboo slips bound with twine sits at your desk, each bearing scrawled ink from some trembling official far removed from court life. Most of it is mind-numbingly tedious. Ox stolen, suspect unknown, militia drill successful, grain tax delayed due to mudslide. But occasionally there's a gem. A local lord reports seeing a tiger spirit in the fog. Another mentions a merchant who claims to sell fireproof paper, though he failed to demonstrate it. You copy each word precisely, resisting the urge to add editorial comments. The margins stay clean, your posture rigid, the ink flow steady. You are a machine with a sense of irony. Midway through, senior scribe Young glides past your table. He leans over your shoulder and hums. Your radicals are uneven again. He mutters. You swallow a sigh. It's the brush. It's your wrist, he says, and walks away like a man who just won an argument he wasn't actually invited to. You vow, silently, to never let him see the tiger spirit report. It would be wasted on him. Around noon, Deoksu joins you for lunch on the roof. It's technically against the rules, but the views are worth the risk. The rooftops of Kesong sprawl below you, like the scales of a great sleeping carp. Every tile a soft glimmer in the daylight. Smoke curls from clay chimneys. Laundry flaps in lazy defiance. Sometimes, Deoksu says, biting into a dumpling, I wish we were bakers. Why? No brushwork. Everyone likes you. Worst case scenario, you burn a bun, not insult a royal cousin with the wrong stroke. You nod, and yet here we are. He shrugs. Guess some of us are cursed with legible handwriting. You spend the next hour dreaming about a bakery called the Inky Roll, where every bun is stamped with calligraphy and you never have to spell check an honorific again. Back at the bureau, a courier arrives with a scroll bound in yellow, kind reserved for personal messages from royal advisors. Everyone watches as the supervisor reads it. Turns out the Crown Prince is requesting a detailed family tree rendering, a decorative scroll for a royal marriage alliance. The job will be split between 3 scribes, and you guessed each one of them. You suppress a groan. Family trees are nightmares in disguise. Every name must be accurate, every lineage correct. Titles, birth order, marriages, deaths. Minor cousins twice removed. They all must align perfectly, or the scroll becomes less of a celebration and more of a declaration of insult. You've seen one scribe get reassigned to latrine records for forgetting a concubine's posthumous honorific. The planning begins. You and the 2 others, one a meticulous elder who smells faintly of glue, the other a twitchy apprentice with sweat-stained sleeves, gather over a blank sheet of grid parchment. You draw lines, circles, double-check marriage ties. You argue over whether a certain Lady Yoon should be given secondary branch status or elevated due to her late husband's brief governorship. Historians still argue about how much influence women like Lady Yoon had behind the curtain of official records. You know the truth is messier than scrolls suggest. You also know your brush must follow protocol, not poetry. Hours pass. The tree takes shape by nightfall. The parchment is dotted with elegant names, small circles, linked branches curling like riverbanks. You're proud of it, exhausted but proud. As you pack up for the night, the apprentice turns to you. How do you not go mad? You pause. I think I do go mad, just slowly. In calligraphy, he stares. You leave him with that dot outside. The wind carries the scent of pine smoke and vinegar stew. You walk home with tired legs, your hand stained with ink, your mind buzzing with ancestral lines and intermarriages. Somewhere in the city, a dog howls once, then stops. A lantern sputters as you pass beneath it. You reach your door, enter, sit. And for a moment, just a breath, you feel like you've carved a groove in the day that didn't exist before. Your handmade marks. Those marks became order. That order meant something, even if only to a prince who will barely glance at the scroll. Still, you did it, and tomorrow, more scrolls, more ink, more uneven radicals. But tonight, you sleep. You wake to rain, soft and patient, tapping the roof like someone too polite to knock loudly. It soaks the streets, turns the courtyard into a glistening mirror, and cools the early summer air until even the clay walls seem to sigh with relief. Rain is not a scribe's enemy unless it leaks through the ceiling, which it often does. You arrive at the bureau under a shared umbrella with Deoksu, both of you dodging puddles like dancers. The outer hall smells of wet wood and damp hemp robes. A small basin catches a steady drip from the eaves. Today is the perfect kind of day for inside work, except, of course, for the roof above the archives that always almost holds. You settle in for what you think will be a quiet day, maybe polishing older texts, brushing new practice scripts, or helping the newer scribes master their line spacing. The air feels still. The sound of dripping water becomes a sort of lullaby. Then word spreads. An imperial inspection is coming. Not just a casual glance from a minor court clerk, but a full walkthrough by one of the high record inspectors. The kind of person whose shoes don't touch mud and who can have you reassigned to onions. Inventory with a single raised eyebrow. Why now? Someone whispers. Rain's good for surprise. Another says, You suddenly find yourself surrounded by frantic movement. Brooms appear from nowhere. Inkstones are scoured, scrolls realigned, sandals straightened by the door in obsessive rows. You get pulled into everything, checking seals, trimming frayed ribbons, aligning the backup brush collection. Even the emergency wax seal kit gets polished. Someone starts polishing the windows with rice water. In the middle of this chaos, a lesser scribe yells, "There's a chicken feather in the ink pot." Everyone gasps. It's as if they just found a curse amulet in the royal ledger. You remove it carefully and pretend it never happened. Historians still argue whether imperial inspections in the Goryeo bureaucracy were sincere evaluations or theater. Today's performance is well-rehearsed. Then, like the quiet eye of a storm, he enters. The inspector wears robes of storm blue silk, folded so precisely they look ironed by divine decree. His hair is braided back into a knot held by a jade pin. He walks with the calm menace of a man who once filed a report about uneven floor tiles and got a wall rebuilt. He surveys the room. No words, just a long, steady look at every desk, every scribe. When he reaches you, he pauses. You bow low. You stay bowed. He doesn't speak. Then you're the one who handled the northern border reports. "Yes, honored Inspector," you say, without looking up. A pause. "That section on the tiger spirit, was that reported verbatim?" You blink. "It was, honored Inspector." he hums, a refreshing detail. Truth is often more useful than polish. And then he moves on. You exhale. Your ribs remember what it is to expand again. The inspection ends after 2 hours. No one's demoted. No one's praised either. Just survival. And in this job, that's a win. Later that afternoon, the supervisor gathers everyone. The inspector left one note, he announces. There's a rustling as people lean in. He wrote, the scribes show steadiness. There is ink in their veins. A pause, then laughter. Nervous, relieved, real. Ink in their veins. You repeat under your breath. That can't be healthy. That night, the rain continues. You walk home slowly, umbrella tucked beneath your arm, letting the drops tap your hair and hands. You think about the years ahead, how many scrolls you'll copy, how many reports you'll script, how many lives you'll touch without them ever knowing your name. You pass the noodle seller who always smiles. You pass the blind poet humming about cranes and ghosts. You pass a sleeping cat curled under a shrine lantern dot when you reach home. Your room smells of damp parchment and old plum tea. You sit down, open a blank scroll dot, and start writing not for the bureau, not for the prints, not for the archives, just for yourself. Something about rain and silence, and the strange kind of joy that comes from surviving another inspection with your dignity, tact, and then the wind down begins. The rain outside grows softer now, like someone wrapping the world in a blanket. By each drop that strikes the rooftop slows, calms, fades. The streets of Kaesong are quiet again, soaked and glimmering under lantern glow. You lie back, eyes half closed, as the memory of the scroll room, the scent of ink and wax, the rhythm of a brush against parchment, blur gently into stillness. Your breathing slows. The palace fades from view. No titles to remember, no characters to perfect, no family trees to sort, just the hush of history, floating like a forgotten scroll on a quiet shelf. The soft sound of footsteps from long ago echo gently in your mind, tracing paths across paper and stone. A world of rituals and duties, of whispered thanks and unseen pride. The life of a Goryeo scribe wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it was meaningful in a quiet way. And maybe tonight, as you rest, you carry a little piece of that time with you. The steady ink, the calm chaos, the sense that your hand helped shape the silent backbone of a kingdom. So let that feeling wash over you like the rain, cool, slow, comforting. Let the storm of the day ease into silence. Let the scrolls close. Let your breath fall in rhythm. You've done enough. You've written enough. You are enough. Now, sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.